So, Judith, I think one of the key questions that our clients are going to ask us is, what outcomes do we think this experience delivers? So, from your point of view, what outcomes do you feel it delivers?
I think it offers people the opportunity to work live, to learn how to collaborate in terms of making sense of information which is put in front of them, so that they can communicate that clearly and usefully at the right time and in the right way to people. I think it's important as well to recognise that there are different types of problem and there are different types of scenario, so there are going to be different types of collaboration skills and behaviours at any one time. So to begin to have that nuancing of what to bring to the table when people are in a meeting and trying to solve problems, I think it can be really, really helpful. So from your perspective, Ruth, what do you think?
I completely agree with all of that. I think I would add to that it's also an opportunity for people to experience live how their emotions are impacting on their thinking and therefore the behaviours that they're choosing, and how through noticing those emotions they can start to make some choices about their behaviours live in the moment, so that they can use them in a way that is going to have a positive impact on the people that they're collaborating with.
Yes, it is absolutely about enabling people to be the very best of themselves.
I think what really genuinely surprised me, which is strange given that we designed the task together, so when we were testing it out, was how quickly I got emotionally involved in the task and noticed some of my own behaviours coming to the fore when people were going off and doing their own thing, and I was like, well, hang on, we haven't coordinated how we're going to all work together, and suddenly everyone had disappeared back down their own rabbit holes doing their own thing. So I think the surprise for me was not only how quickly those emotions and behaviours came to the fore for me, and I know when we reviewed it they did for other people on the task, but also how quickly the time disappeared. I guess I sort of had a bit of a resistance beforehand, thinking, can we really spend this amount of time online and all stay engaged? And it amazed me when we got to the end. It was like, where did that 2.5 hours go? Because for the whole of that 2.5 hours, I was totally consumed by the activity, which is something that I really didn't expect. Even though we designed it, I guess there was a bit of skepticism there on my part. I think, yeah, can we really stay engaged for that amount of time? And that really genuinely surprised me when we tested it.
I think it's a really important point that you make there about whether, how to compare it to other online learning experiences. And it's a conversation the three of us have had a lot around, how can we make it different so that it isn't passive? And certainly a lot of the other things that we've looked at, whether it's online learning modules, webinars, online quizzes, as you say, Neil, they are absolutely reliant upon an individual sitting there and just going through a series of questions, a series of content. But there's no emotional engagement with it. And I think that's the crucial part for us, isn't it? And that's what we believe we've achieved in this new experience that we have created together.
I mean, that was the thing that I was really challenging myself with when we were coming up with the concept, when the three of us first started talking about it, because, doing my own CPD over the last 12 months, I've had to engage with various forms of online content. And I think one of the challenges for me personally as a learner is I get disengaged quite quickly, especially if it just involves me just sitting and listening or sitting and reading. And so I just wanted to, us to think about how could we design something that, in a way, it sort of mandates that everybody involved in the activity has to stay engaged. And how do you manage that if they're not in the room? If people in a room, you can read the body language, you can read the group dynamics, but how do you achieve that with a group online? So I think that was the thing that was really interested me, is how could we make this that really immersive and visceral experience where everybody has to rely on each other to get to the end of the activity, and that there's lots of concurrent activity going on, so people have to go off and do separate things and then come back together, which then in a way forces people to stay engaged because they know they've got to, because somebody else isn't doing it for them. And that's what I really liked about the work that we'd done with you before, Judith, on the brain toffee tasks.
Well, certainly it's a key element of any of the design work that I do, is to make the story, as it is a story, to be fully engaging, so that it feels something that's different to work, but still draws on all those communication skills that you do need at work, So people enter into this unfolding drama and can't help themselves, really. They get more and more immersed in it, more and more drawn in, and they really cannot afford to dip out in any way. They have to be fully emotionally and mentally engaged in order to cope with the information, to deal with what's coming at them, to integrate it, and then to feed it back into the group when they feel it's best set. And they're all the skills for collaboration that haven't gone away.
And I think, just to build on that, Judith, when we have obviously been through this as a team ourselves to test it out and to check that we're happy with what that experience is like. I know from my own experience, I suddenly felt completely out of control, and it brought out a lot of my normal behaviours when we're operating in a kind of pressured situation, where I wanted to have a task that I could just go away and focus on, but actually everybody in our group was having a different emotional response to it. And I think it was really interesting for me how quickly that happened and how much I engaged in the story straight away. And I think the key thing for me is it's an experiential task that's been designed to generate these real emotions live in the moment. Mm-hmm. But interspersed with that are a series of interventions by a facilitator, where we're introducing new content to help people understand so what actually is going on for you at the moment, whether that's some things around neuroscience or whether that's some things around operating in a VUCA environment. But just some content to help them understand what's going on, but then crucially an opportunity to stop, reflect and notice what are my personal responses in this situation. How am I influencing the task? How am I impacting on the people that I'm collaborating with? And therefore, what changes do I need to make as we move forward into the next part of this activity in order to ensure that I'm being as effective as I can? And I think it's that combination of experiential task and activity with live emotions being experienced whilst being held by a facilitator through these series of interventions as we go through.
Yeah, certainly. I was thinking really, really hard about, seeing all these talking heads on a screen and wondering to what extent we were losing that potential of collaboration. What were the extra little bits that were kind of maybe just falling away as we're working virtually? And so for me, I really wanted to make sure that any exercises that we could do, that we could help people work out what it was that could bring them closer together and just somehow develop that extra edge, where it isn't just really a case of how do we share a document and how do we just move an idea around, but it really was people talking properly and listening to each other really, really clearly, and to able to articulate some ideas that really is really at the basis of good collaboration that potentially I thought we were in the danger of losing as we all go into two-dimensional screen world. So it's great to start it off.
I think a question that keeps coming up for me is behavioural change able to happen online? Can we give people that practice, that experience, that immersive sense of what it's like to help them make the changes they need to make? And I think we spent a lot of time wrestling with that, and I think from my point of view it was something that felt really important. And one of the things that really stood out for me was that it needed to be something that was immersive and that people had a real emotional response to. But I think also then questioning what's the role of a facilitator in any kind of development and training. And I think we've recognised that role of the facilitator is in holding the space for people to then understand what that learning is. So they're not there to just give content and give knowledge. It's not about them and their knowledge. It's about their ability to hold that space. And so looking at how we can combine this visceral, real, immersive experience with a facilitator holding the space in order to help people really understand what's gone on for them so that they can then start to learn, can then start to make some key changes.
And I guess it's just been important for me to sort of think about, can we genuinely deliver sort of lasting behavioural change in the way we do when we're face to face if we're creating an online product? And I suppose that's the bit for me is around, we can put anything online, you can put whatever content you like online, but can we really replicate what we do face to face? And that's been the challenge for me to sort of mull over and find a vehicle that would genuinely do that. because it's something that I haven't found in all the research that I've done, when I've been looking for examples of that.
What excited me about this was having worked with teams face to face and knowing how important collaboration is for them and what happens within that experiential activity, is kind of keeping hold of that, so that as people went online, we still kept that capacity to develop and to collaborate those skills, even though people could be miles and miles apart and essentially become 2D and really talking at each other perhaps rather than with each other. So to try and create a scenario where we could really bring out some of the skills and behaviors that would last beyond that exercise, so that they were genuinely learning to collaborate much better in their workplace. I think that challenge for me just meant that collaboration hasn't gone away. In fact, if anything, people need to learn to collaborate maybe in a slightly different way, but still definitely need to collaborate.
Yeah, I completely agree with both of you. And I think there's something that's really stood out for me as well, is the fact that lots of our clients are moving more and more towards wanting their teams to be able to work effectively virtually. And so actually doing something which actually gives them that opportunity to practice some of those skills in that real virtual environment where they're going to have to operate on a day-to-day basis is crucial. And we spent quite a lot of time thinking about how we could make this as accessible as possible to a whole range of different organisations. And I think recognising that for some, they've got a great team of in-house trainers and specialists who would be very able to facilitate this kind of experience very well and may not want to bring in the external expertise. Whereas for other organisations, they might prefer to have that external input in terms of that facilitation role. And so we wanted to be able to offer the full range. Really with the higher up you go in terms of the different levels, the greater the input from us, the greater the level of facilitation support and in some cases coaching, because we feel as though that facilitator role is key to helping ensure that the participants get as much out of it as possible. I think the role of the facilitator is very much to hold the space for people to learn. And I think we've probably touched on this before, but I think often, particularly in online learning, the facilitator takes centre stage and it's about their knowledge. Whereas actually this isn't about their knowledge. This is about them being able to draw out people's learning, offer the odd bit of knowledge if that's important or relevant, but essentially help people to notice and to make sense of the experience that they're having in order to start to recognise some of the behavioural changes that they might want to make. And I think it takes real skill and sophistication. It isn't a trainer role. It's definitely a facilitation role, and somebody who's very experienced as a coach, being able to ask good questions, to listen to what people are saying and to what they're not saying, and to really help them uncover in themselves the things that perhaps they're not noticing or not wanting to notice.